Eventually, after a couple of divorces, or something that happens in your life that's you can't control, then it comes out, and then it's unmanageable. So it's one of the things that I see with people is looking for love in all the wrong places. All these things. Addictions are another one of those things that the reason why I think people, take drugs or alcohol or whatever is when they're in that acute phase in the brain and the GABA receptors are all lit up and you feel calm and peaceful. I think that's one of the times that people actually feel connected to themselves. It's ironic, it's odd, but in general, like anxiety, and here's one of those things that, you're so great at sound bites. Anxiety occurs because you blocked love for yourself. That's really what happens. So one of the things that drugs and alcohol do is they take away some of those blocks. They make you feel connected to yourself.
It's so true. I've never thought about it that way.
People with anxiety and addiction hold hands. Like they are so close together. They both come from childhood wounding, and the alcohol or the drug or whatever allows people to feel connected to themselves. I just had a surgery like 3 weeks ago, and they were putting me under, and they put the mask on my face. And as I went under, and because anesthetics, general anesthetics are dissociative,
right?
They separate from. So as I was going under, I'm saying, okay, I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. And Rusty's my name for my 12-year-old self, right? That suffered at the hands of his dad, who wasn't abusive or violent, but just crazy. And so I just kept saying, I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. I love you, Rusty. And it was just a nice way to kind of go under. And I think that's what ketamine and these psychedelics, I think it's just a way of getting connected to yourself, because that's how you heal, is you become connected to yourself. It doesn't come from outside of you. But we have to have that love from outside of us as well, of course. And, as you talk about, the biggest relationship is the relationship you have to yourself. And as cliche and woo and all that stuff as it sounds, and as a neuroscientist and a medical doctor, I sometimes want to have a seizure when I talk about this because it's just so non-scientific. But love and healing is non-scientific. We can't reduce it down to something that we can reproduce in a science lab. And that's what heals us. So science will help us cope, but I haven't seen really science help us heal. I'm going to give one more thing, and out of all the incredible advancements we've made in neuroscience in the last 15 years, and they have been amazing, very few of those advancements have actually led to different clinical outcomes when you're sitting with a patient. So that's one of the things that I'm kind of disappointed about in science a little bit. But science is very helpful at helping us cope. Physiological side, there's a bunch of things that really help us cope. But to heal, it's an inside job. You really have to learn how to connect with that younger, wounded part of you. And if you don't, you'll always have alarm. You'll always be anxious.
I'd say the one exception is the exciting research in the area of all these psychedelics. But I think you just pointed out the reason why this is the biggest breakthrough. Because when you have a guided therapeutic experience with a ketamine or an MDMA or psilocybin, you have the ability to reconnect and join in with yourself.
Absolutely.
And repair what you say is the original cause of anxiety, which is a situation in childhood where you felt separate from the caregivers whose only job was to make you feel safe and loved and looked after and cared for. And so, I want to go back to, I have this vision of there are these 3 phases as I'm listening to you speak. There is the phase of self-awareness and awakening and this kind of wake up moment where you're like, holy cow, maybe the overthinking and the obsessiveness with, achievement, maybe feeling on edge all the time. Maybe this isn't the way I'm meant to feel. Maybe this is anxiety, so there's this first phase of self-awareness and the wake-up moment. And then there's the second layer, going a little bit deeper, where you make an attempt to cope, whether that's through therapy or it is through breath work, or you mentioned meditation or exercise, the bazillion different things that you and I have both done for decades in order to cope with our anxiety, which for me meant trying to turn it down a little. And then there's a third and deeper phase, which is what you are teaching everybody. And that third phase is healing it and going deep and getting to the root cause, which you have so beautifully taught us, is separation and feeling separate from others and feeling separate from yourself. And when you feel separate, you don't experience love. You don't experience safety. And so what I want to know, Dr. Kennedy, going back to Carrie's question, is there a simple series of steps that anybody who's listening today that's like, holy cow, I have anxiety, or I'm tired of coping and talking about anxiety, I want to go deeper and start the work of healing it? You mentioned inner child. Should we go back and get a photo of ourselves from when we were 8 years old? Like, give me like 3 things to do today to start that work, to go and reconnect with the part of ourselves that has been separate since childhood.
There's a lot of like woo-woo inner child stuff. Like, people get really fired up by this concept of inner child. And I find the people that get the most fired up by the inner child, oh, that's a bunch of crap or whatever, are the ones that have the most childhood wounding, because they don't want to go back there. Right? That's
right. I do have to admit, anytime anybody uses those 2 words, inner child, I'm like, ugh, eye roll. Totally. Sounds so stupid.
Same.
But as a neuroscientist and a medical doctor who specializes in this, what the fuck are you talking about when you say inner child?
Yeah, it's the remnant of, it's that, for the science people, like it's the amygdala based remnant of the trauma. So for your car accident, when you rolled on the ski trip, there is your amygdala coupled the sound of crunching snow with trauma. So now whenever you go to the mailbox and you hear crunching snow, your amygdala coupled that sound with the trauma. So your body will feel exactly now when you're on your way out to the mailbox as you did back then.
I want to share one other example for those of you who haven't heard the first episode that we did with Dr. Kennedy. And there's a second coupling that happened for me, which is I was molested by an older kid during a sleepover in the 4th grade. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt in every cell of my body that something was very wrong. And what happened is the trauma, and now you're saying inner child, and the base of the amygdala coupled the experience of waking up after being a victim and the feeling that something's wrong with mourning. And ever since I've been in 4th grade, I wake up every morning, and the morning itself triggers me to feel exactly the same way as a 50-year-old woman that I did when I was in the 4th grade and had woke up that morning. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And about that, when you came downstairs and your mom was making pancakes and she said, "How did you sleep, honey?" And you saw the other kid, if you had a chance at that point, if there was a magic wand where, you went over to your mother and said, "Hey, I've got to talk to you about something." And you went to a different room, and then you talked about what happened, and she soothed you. It's not your fault. She rubbed your back. That probably would have mitigated this whole thing. Because if we have this love and attention, this bubble that I call it, from our parents and caregivers, we are protected. So everyone has trauma in childhood. Like, there's no way of avoiding, but there's a difference between like drama and trauma. Trauma is when the event actually changes your nervous system so it gets stuck in the on position. It's kind of like if you're on a railroad and the old time switch, the switches they used to have on the railroad.
Yeah.
So
of course.
Normally, if you go along, you've got good enough parents, you have a reasonable childhood, you go along the track is straight, and you just mature. Now, if you get trauma in there, it's like one of those railway switches that switches you off track. So it takes you into this mode of protection as opposed to this mode of growth. So if you keep going on the track, you're in a growth mode, You feel safe, as Einstein said, is the world a safe place? You feel safe. But when we have this trauma and it's not resolved at the time, that switch gets thrown and our nervous system changes. Again, I don't like using the word permanently because we can move it back, but the amygdala never forgets. There's always a remnant of that. So what we have to do is go back, find that child at that age, younger self, inner child. I usually use younger self because it doesn't turn people off so much, but find your younger self, give them the love and support now that they needed back then. Because again, the amygdala has no sense of time. So we can use that fact that the amygdala has no sense of time to connect with that for grade 4 and soothe her, give her what she needed back then. And that starts to heal the root cause. So then we can pull the switch back. But the older we get and the more that thing gets ingrained, the harder that switch is rusted into the on position. So every time the train goes down that track and we experience something like that, like we wake up, it goes off that track. It goes into that protection mode rather than the growth mode of going straight ahead. So if we go back, we find the switch, we heal that younger version of ourselves. And again, I know how flaky this sounds. And as a neuroscientist, it's really difficult for me to talk about the younger self, inner child. But I know after suffering from 30 plus years of crippling anxiety myself, this was the only thing that allowed me to heal, was to go back. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a meditation teacher. I've done all this stuff. I've done it all. And nothing really helped. And like you, I have morning anxiety or alarm. It wakes me up. I feel it. And then the big thing about having the alarm is don't add thoughts to it. Like allow the alarm to be there. Go into sensation, use your breath, use the grounding that you're around. If you're lying in your bed, feel the grounding, feel the support, feel your body, even if it's uncomfortable. And then go back and find that younger version of yourself. So you're asking for sort of a stepwise thing. So basically, when people get anxious, they go into their heads and they start overthinking. And that's a trap because you'll never get out of that. You'll never get out of that overthinking because the mind will tell you. The mind says, hey, we have the answer with more thinking. And it's like, well, I thought anxiety was a problem of overthinking. It's like, no, it's not. It's not. Just keep thinking. And that doesn't work. So what you have to do is go into your body. Now, the problem is your body feels alarmed. So why am I going to go down into my body when it feels alarmed? And that's why we have things like internal family systems therapy, somatic experiencing, psychedelics to some extent, to make you feel safe in your body again. Because once you feel safe in your body again, then you have the platform. So when you're feeling anxious, or as I like to say, alarmed, go, where in my body do I feel this? Where is it? For me, it's in my solar plexus. I talk about that in the book. But find where the alarm is in your system. And some people, it's in their throat. Some people, it's across their shoulders. But see if you can put your hand over it and just sort of make a mental connection with that alarm and see if you don't feel better almost instantly. Now, it's not going to take it away, but there is a sense when I first started doing this, it's like, hey, this is the first time in 30 years that I'm actually on the right track. So when you feel anxious, don't go into your head, go into the sensation of your body, even if it hurts. Find that alarm, find where it is. Because I drill down with people. It's like, does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have a temperature? Like I really drill down in there. Because there's a part of our brain called the insular cortex, that's kind of like the mediator between the thinking brain and the feeling body. And that insula, I think, will be in the next few years really important in changing this old pattern so that when we feel it in our body, we can go back, feel the exact same way that we did back at the time, you with crunching snow, and me in the mornings as well, and go, okay, there is a different path. I can actually flip the railway switch back over to the growth part and get out of protection. So it's really about connecting with that feeling of alarm in your body, because that feeling of alarm in your body is your younger self.
We are talking anxiety today, and we have our most popular and most requested expert back. This is a topic, whether you have struggled with anxiety or not, we are all impacted by this.